Under the relentless pulse of a New York skyline at dusk, where the Hudson's dark waters mirrored the jagged spires and fractured silver, Usher stood motionless on the balcony of a penthouse suite, a half-smoked cigar clamped between his fingers, its ember glowing like a deferred promise. The city below thrummed with the indifferent rhythm of taxis and takeout deliveries, but his mind was elsewhere, trapped in the dry heat of a desert arena, the echo of a single, seismic step that had upended his sense of legacy. He just wrapped a podcast taping, the kind where hosts prodded for war stories from 3 decades of hits. And when the question landed, that Vegas night with Jungkook, the one that birthed the remix everyone still dissects, what lingers from it? His throat tightened, words faltering into a confession he hadn't rehearsed. Man, I can't shake that first moment. It's etched in me deeper than any chart topper. The admission hung in the air even now. Hours later, as the wind off the river carried the faint brine of salt and solitude, pulling him back to the origin point where admiration cracked open into something irrevocable. That pull had begun subtly, woven into the fabric of late-night scrolls during the grind of his Vegas residency, when the adrenaline from sold-out nights ebbed into the quiet scrutiny of fan tributes. Usher, whose career had been a masterclass in evolution, from the synth-pop confessions of his teens to the soul-stirred anthems of his 40s, found himself pausing on a clip that surfaced like contraband at his feed, a teenage boy in a dimly lit practice room, lit only by the blue wash of a laptop screen, dissecting with a ferocity that turned mimicry into manifesto. The kid's name was Jungkook, magnate of BTS, a group Usher had clocked peripherally amid K-pop's tidal wave. But this was different, raw, unfiltered. Every swivel of the hips landed with anatomical precision, yet laced with an undercurrent of yearning, as if the choreography were a language for emotions too jagged to voice. Usher replayed it thrice that night, the cigar he'd meant to light forgotten on the ashtray, a rare chill prickling his skin despite the sweet's recycled air. It wasn't flattery. It was familiarity, the ghost of his own hunger at 19, when Atlanta's clubs had been his proving ground, bodies pressing close under strobing lights, testing if rhythm could redeem the ache of invisibility. By morning, with the strip's false dawn bleeding pink across the blinds, he'd fired off the invite. Neutral ground, no strings, just bodies in motion to see what spark. Jungkook's arrival sliced through the pre-dawn hush of McCarran Airport like a blade through silk. His flight from Seoul, a gauntlet of layovers that left him hollowed out, eyes shadowed under the brim of a ball cap pulled low. At 26, he carried the weight of a solo era just cresting. Golden fresh off the presses, its tracks a labyrinth of introspection he'd carved from the wreckage of group dynamics and the looming shadow of enlistment. But this detour felt like trespass, a whim from an icon whose discography had soundtracked his covert dance sessions in Busan's rain-lashed garages. The limo ride blurred the casino marquees into neon streaks, his fingers drumming erratic patterns on the leather seat, rehearsing not steps but breaths, the internal cadence that kept doubt at bay. Usher waited not in the lobby's ostentatious glow, but in a nondescript side entrance to the arena's underbelly, leaning against a cinder-block wall scarred by equipment carts, his frame clad in a simple black tee and sweats that belied the king he'd become. No entourage, no introductions, just a nod, the kind exchange between prize-fighters sizing up the ring, and a quiet, "Follow me." Lights low, music loud. The corridor stretched like a vein pulsing with deferred echoes, fluorescent strips buzzing overhead as they descended into the rehearsal hall, a cavernous space where the air tasted of rubber mats and residual sweat from the previous night's crew. The first moment unfurled without fanfare, the door sealing behind them with a pneumatic sigh that amplified the sudden intimacy. The room's vastness contracting around two silhouettes under the spill of a single overhead rig. Usher cued the track from a battered console. Yeah, its iconic synth hook uncoiling like smoke from a hidden trapdoor, and stepped back, arms loose at his sides, his gaze a steady anchor amid the building groove. Jungkook shed his jacket in one fluid motion, the fabric pooling on the floor like shed inhibitions, revealing a fitted shirt that traced the disciplined lines of shoulders honed by years of formation drills and free weight confessions. He didn't launch into the routine. Instead, he circled the beat's perimeter, feet whispering against the sprung floor, testing its give like a diver gauging a pool's depth before the plunge. Tension coiled in his jaw, a subtle tick betraying the storm beneath. The pressure of representation, not just for himself, but for the seven who'd built an empire on synchronized breaths, now fracturing into solo orbits that demanded reinvention without betrayal. Usher sensed it, the invisible tether yanking at the kid's core, and mirrored it with a subtle lean, his own history whispering back. The terror of LaFace's scrutiny, where one off note could unravel a deal, turning prodigy into footnote. Breathe into it. Usher murmured over the bass swell, not command but communion, the words threading into the mix like an ad-lib. And then, as the chorus crested, Jungkook ignited, his body uncoiling in a drop that fused precision with peril, hips snapping through the signature roll with a torque that evoked not replication but reclamation, sweat beading almost instantly on his collarbone under the rig's unforgiving glare. In that instant, the air between them charged, electric as the static before a storm breaks. Usher's breath catching not from the move's technical grace, but from the emotional underbelly it bared, a flicker of ferocity that echoed his own buried archives. The nights when confessions poured out like bloodletting after a heartbreak that nearly derailed him. He joined without preamble, his steps a counterpoint, seasoned, serpentine, weaving sensuality into the kinetic storm Jungkook unleashed, their shadows merging on the wall like figures in a distorted diptych. No words passed, only the syncopated slap of sneakers and the shared rhythm of inhalations. Jungkook's eyes locking briefly with Usher's in the mirror's reflection. Raw, searching, silent pact forged in motion. It lasted mere minutes, that inaugural exchange, but it lodged like shrapnel. For Usher, a jolt reminding him that mastery wasn't hoarded but handed off, the thrill of witnessing a peer eclipse your blueprint. For Jungkook, a validation that transcended fandom, his idol's presence dissolving the gulf between aspirant and equal, if only for the span of a hook. They collapsed against the console afterward, chests rising in tandem, laughter bubbling up unbidden, nervous at first, then genuine, as water bottles clinked in a makeshift toast. "You don't just dance it," Usher said, wiping his brow with the hem of his shirt. "You become it. That's rare air, brother." Jungkook ducked his head, a flush creeping up his neck, but his smile held the quiet steel of someone who'd just glimpsed his own horizon. From that ember, the collaboration flared into permanence, the remix of Standing Next to You, crystallizing weeks later in Seoul's high-rise studios, where winter fog pressed against the glass like uninvited thoughts. Tracks layered in cross-continental sessions, Usher's verses dropping via encrypted files, laced with ad-libs that nodded to their shared lineage, until the final cut pulsed with hybrid vitality, R&B's confessional warmth braided into K-pop's architectural drive. Release night hit like a fever dream. Billboards in Times Square syncing their promo reel, Jungkook's isolations bleeding into Usher's glides under a cascade of pixels, fans worldwide dissecting the subtext in live threads that span time zones. Yet for Usher, the metrics blurred against the indelible imprint of that first ascent into the hall. The way Jungkook's form had cut through the dimness. Not as performer, but as portent, a young force reclaiming space in a genre that had often sidelined voices from the East. It stirred a paternal ache, not of diminishment, but amplification, echoing the mentors who'd seen past his boyish frame to the architect within. Puffy sharp edits in bad boy sessions, Babyface's patient harmonies in the booth. Jungkook, too, carried it forward into the maelstrom of his solo push, the memory surfacing in the hush of vocal warm-ups before arena bows, a talisman against the isolation of spotlights trained on one enlistment severed the thread abruptly that spring, Jungkook vanishing into the regimented blur of green fatigues and dawn marches, his dispatches reduced to pixelated glimpses in fan compilations. A saluted wave from a barracks window, a hummed snippet of their track echoing off concrete. Usher marked it from afar, the Super Bowl stage that February a glittering void without the kid's counterpoint, his performance a solo triumph laced with phantom syncs, the crowd's roar hollow against the what-if of a missed bridge. In the downtime between encores, he'd confide to close collaborators over Whiskey Neat, the admissions slipping like smoke. That first moment haunted him, not as regret, but as revelation. The rare collision where admiration yielded to alliance. Two timelines intersecting to redraw pop's map. Jungkook's discharge in late 2025 brought the echo full circle. Their first post-service call a meandering loop of shop talk and silences heavy with subtext. Plans for a joint stage at the Grammys dangling like bait. But the true residue lingered in quieter veins. Usher's playlist now seeded with BTS deep cuts. Jungkook's notebook margins etched with R&B cadences that bent toward vulnerability. That residue rippled outward, threading through the zeitgeist's undercurrents, where fandoms morphed from echo chambers into crucibles of cross-pollination. Army edits fusing Usher's catalog with Jungkook's, spawning duets in dorm rooms from Lagos to Lion that blurred national lines into shared syntax. It illuminated the fragile alchemy of human connection in an industry built on disposability. Icons not as monoliths, but as conduits, passing fragments of fire that ignite unforeseen chains. Vulnerability, once pop's guarded secret, emerged as the true currency. The unguarded glance in a mirror, the pause before a pivot, binding strangers in collective exhale. Algorithms chase trends, but these moments endured, human-scale miracles amid the machine's hum, reminding that legacy isn't accrued in isolation, but in the sparks exchanged when paths converge. As the New York night deepened, the cigar's ash scattering into the wind like fleeting notes, Usher crushed the butt against the railing, the skyline's glow softening into a haze of possibility. Across the globe, in a Seoul high-rise where city lights pooled like spilled ink, Jungkook paused mid-strum on his acoustic, the chord resolving in a silence, a faint smile tracing his lips at the memory's resurgence. Their first moment wasn't a milestone etched in gold. It was the quiet ignition, the unspoken vow that rhythms, once shared, never fully recede. In the vast orchestration of lives entwined by sound, it pulsed on, a heartbeat unbound by borders, echoing into the uncharted measures ahead. Months slipped by in that suspended rhythm, the kind where collaborations simmer like slow-cooked confessions, until the Grammy nod arrived unannounced, a gilded envelope sliding under Usher's hotel door in Miami during a layover that felt more like limbo. He traced the embossed letters with a fingertip scarred from guitar strings long retired, the nomination for Best Pop Duo/Group Performance, tied to their remix, hitting like a deferred bass drop, resonant but not entirely surprising. Yet it unearthed the fragment again. That Vegas hall, the air thick with the tang of fresh exertion. Jungkook's silhouette fracturing in the mirror as their steps overlap for the first time, a convergence that had rewritten not just a track, but the undercurrents of trust. He texted the kid that afternoon, thumbs hovering over the screen in the humid haze of his suite, the message simple. They called. "You in for the stage?" The reply buzzed back within minutes. 3 words laced with ellipsis. Wouldn't miss it. "Let's burn it down." No exclamation, just the quiet certainty of someone who'd learned to temper fire with focus. Enlistment's forge having tempered his edges without dulling the blaze. Rehearsals convened in a sprawling warehouse on the outskirts of LA, a concrete expanse where echoes ricocheted like unspoken doubts. The space rented under nondescript pseudonyms to evade the paparazzi's predatory lens. Jungkook flew in direct from Tokyo, his schedule a knotted vine of promo stops and producer meets, landing with the faint jet lag hollows under his eyes, but a duffel packed with fresh demos, sketches of a potential follow-up, hooks that bent R&B's introspection toward K-pop's expansive ache. Usher arrived first, as always, staking claim to the center mat with a portable speaker that hummed lo-fi soul cuts from his formative tapes, the air conditioning groaning against the inland heat that seeped through loading docks. When Jungkook pushed through the side door, wind blown from the cab ride, their greeting bypassed words. A dap that lingered into a half hug, shoulders colliding with the easy physics of bodies attuned to the same frequency. "You look like you've been wrestling ghosts," Usher quipped, eyeing the faint tension in Jungkook's stance, the way his fingers flexed as if chasing phantom chords. Jungkook chuckled, low and evasive, dropping his bag with a thud that scattered loose picks across the floor. Just the usual, chasing mine, dodging theirs. But this, he gestured to the empty expanse, mirrors lining one wall like judgmental sentinels. "This feels like home turf." They dove in without preamble, the remix's blueprint unfurling from memory more than sheet music, bodies mapping the terrain of tempo and torque. But this time, the first moment's echo amplified. As the intro swelled, those layered synths evoking twilight confessions, Jungkook initiated the drop, his pivot pulling Usher into orbit, a reversal that flipped mentor to mirror. Sweat bloomed quick under the industrial spots, shirts clinging like second thoughts, their breaths sinking in the offbeats where vulnerability pooled. The shared glance acknowledging the chasm bridged, the enlistment scars Jungkook wore like invisible ink. The decades Usher carried as quiet ballast. Midway through the bridge, a misstep jarred them. Jungkook's ankle twisting on a slick patch of mat, his weight shifting precarious. Usher's arm shooting out instinctive to steady, palm pressing firm against the small of his back. Time fractured there, the track looping unnoticed, the contact lingering a beat too long, charged with the unspoken. Gratitude, guardianship, the rare fraternity where icons shed armor. "Got you," Usher murmured, the words half lost in the hum. But Jungkook's nod carried the weight of absolutes, eyes meeting in the haze with a clarity that pierced the dimness. They reset, laughter fracturing the tension like glass underfoot, but the imprint deepened. Usher feeling the pull of Legacy's handoff, not as loss but as multiplication. Jungkook tasting the freedom of equals, unburdened by deference. The Grammy stage loomed like a coliseum of crystal and scrutiny, February's chills seeping into the Crypto.com arena despite the throng's fevered warmth, celebrities orbiting in a constellation of borrowed glamour. Backstage thrummed with a ritual frenzy, stylists pinning hems, vocal coaches murmuring scales, the air laced with hairspray and half-swallowed nerves. But in their cordon green room, a pocket of calm prevailed, walls papered in faded tour posters that whispered of eras past. Jungkook paced the narrow strip of carpet, earbuds in, cycling a warm-up track that blended their voices in hypothetical thirds, his free hand tracing the chain at his neck, a subtle talisman from Busan days, etched with coordinates of origin. Usher lounged on the worn sofa, legs extended, scrolling through army fan art on his phone. Intricate murals of their Vegas silhouette, rendered in ink and light, each one a testament to the devotion that had propelled this union from whim to watershed. "They see it, you know," he said, tilting the screen toward Jungkook, who paused mid-stride to peer over, a half-smile cracking his focus. "That spark, not the polish, the raw wire." Jungkook sank beside him, exhaling slow, the proximity easy now, forged in sweat and silences. "It's mutual. Your moves, they unlocked something. Made the cage feel optional." The admission hung, fragile as stage fog, bridging the generational rift. Usher recalling the cages of his youth, label execs dictating tempos, heartbreak scripted into singles. Jungkook voicing the newer binds of global gaze, where every ad-lib invited autopsy. Performance night cracked open the arena like a geode, the crowd's roar a geological shift as their names flashed in synchronized strobes. The stage erupting in a veil of dry ice that swirled like unresolved arpeggios. They emerged tandem, Usher's velvet baritone anchoring the verse with gravel-edged intimacy, Jungkook's tenor slicing through the chorus like sunlight through slats. Their choreography a dialogue of contrasts. Usher's fluid undulations yielding to Jungkook's sharp extensions, bodies converging in the hook's apex where hands clasped overhead, a tableau of unity that drew gasps from the front rows. The camera lingered on that clasp, broadcasting the micro-moment. Fingers interlocking brief but unbreakable, sweat slicked and symbolic, the arena's pulse sinking to their shared exhale. Offstage, as confetti rained in iridescent shards, they collapsed into winged shadows, chests heaving. The wind, statuette clutched between them, secondary to the surge of completion. We did that. Jungkook breathed, voice raw from the belts, his grin boyish amid the gloss. Usher slung an arm around his shoulders, the weight fraternal, pulling him close amid the chaos. Nah, kid, we started it. Back in that hall. And it ain't ending here. In the afterglows sprawl, after parties bleeding into dawn brunches, headlines etching their duet into the cultural strata. The moment's residue proliferated, seeding unlikely alliances. A rising R&B trio from Accra sampling their bridge in a track that topped Afrobeats charts. A Tokyo street crew choreographing hybrid routines that fused a remix with Taiko Thunder. Fandoms, ever the vigilant weavers, spun tapestries from threads of speculation. Podcasts dissecting the Got You clips slowed to frames. Essays tracing the lineage from Brown's cape drop to their clasp, illuminating how icons, in their unguarded orbits, humanize the divine. It underscored the quiet mechanics of influence. Not decrees from on high, but collisions in low-lit halls, where a steadying hand becomes manifesto. Vulnerability, the true choreography. In an age of curated feeds, these exchanges pierce the veil, fostering kinships that span latitudes, reminding that music's deepest cuts heal through harmony, not isolation. Dawn broke over the Pacific as their jet arced eastward, the cabin dimmed to a hush of reclined seats and residual champagne flutes. Usher dozing with a script unrolled across his lap. Outlines for a biopic he'd greenlit, pondering cameos. Jungkook, window seat claimed, traced cloud formations with his gaze, the horizon a blank canvas for the next verse, their playlist looping soft on shared AirPods. A medley of origins, fading into standing next to you. The first moment, that Vegas ignition, no longer haunted, it anchored a compass point in the flux, propelling them toward unscripted encores. In the symphony of pursuits entwined, it whispered persistence. Rhythms exchanged endure, evolving into anthems that outlast spotlights, binding souls across the divide in perpetual, unspoken crescendo.